Don't film me. No. Yeah, I don't like anime. But the accoutrements and other things, they're too much. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So,
Yeah, hello.
for the panelists, kindly check your audios whether you're transmitting the audio, and also for your videos.
Okay.
So I can get you, Serah, so you're good to go. Same case to Mr. Robert.
Okay.
Okay.
Noluthando.
Hi.
Good. Can see you and can get you clear, loud and clear.
Great.
Father Coffee.
Hi.
Okay, you're good too. So I'll hand over the meeting to Serah, and then Serah, you can pick it up from here.
Okay.
All right.
Hello. Hi, team.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm fine. Hi. So I'm glad to have met you. I think we just meet on emails. So I wish that maybe you could each introduce yourself. So maybe I could get your names correctly, pronounce them correctly. So I think Noluthando, I've had your name. So that's how it's spelled, yeah? Noluthando. Yeah. Okay. And Father Coffee.
Yes, you are silent. That is fine to go.
Okay, that's the name. Okay. Let me just get your first name quickly. Sorry, Father Coffee, you're part of the panel.
No.
Okay, yeah, because I'm not seeing your name, so I'm so shocked.
Okay.
Okay. So, will you be asking a question? Do you want to ask a question or?
Yes, it depends on the presentation. Then
Okay.
I'll let you and then.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Robert.
Yes.
The man with the big voice.
So I am Robert Mawinyega, but I'm okay with Robert.
Okay.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay.
You may struggle to. You may struggle with the surname, so.
So you can try in the first place.
But you can break them into three. Mawinyega, and that should be fine.
Oh, Mawinyaga. Which country
Wonderful.
are you from?
You got it. I think you got it. Mawinyega. Yeah.
Mawinyaga, yeah. Which country are you from?
From Ghana.
Oh, Ghana. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good. How about you, Father Coffee?
I'm also from Ghana. Actually,
He's your?
my boss.
Hey.
Oh, I see. This is interesting.
Take it easy, my coffee. Take it easy.
That is my boss.
Okay. So, Miss Noluthando, you see you're coming second in the panel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've seen that.
Okay. Do you wish I share with you the question I'll ask you? Or I can just ask during the panel?
I really don't mind either way. My nerves are a little bit shot at the moment, so I think I'll pick it up as I go.
Okay, good. Because actually it's just within what Father Charles shared with you. So I just picked something around that. Yeah. Okay. So we shall begin at, I think, 5:30 sharp. Yeah, so I leave you can grab some water. I want to grab some warm water myself.
Great.
So please give me a minute.
interested in voting. Register to vote. It is your right.
It is every Zambian citizen's right to register to vote.
Exactly. As long as you're 18 years and above, hold a green national registration card, then you're eligible to register in the Electoral Commission of Zambia Voters Registration Exercise, which is from the 28th of October to the 30th of November 2020.
I have changed my mind, since it is every citizen's right to register, and I will tell my friends' friends to tell their friends to go and register. This time around.
Hello, hi, Father Orobator.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Father Zampini.
Oh,
Hello.
nice to meet you.
Yeah. Oh.
My name is Serah Thiga. I'm the moderator for today.
Hello, Sarah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, yes, I can hear you very well. Welcome to today's session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We shall begin in about 2 minutes. Okay.
When I speak, can I share the screen? Or I don't know if you are the Yes, I can, yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello, Serah.
Good morning, US and Latin America. Good afternoon, Europe. And good evening, Africa, Asia, East Asia, and Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar on Pope Francis' new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti. The webinar is entitled, What is Pope Francis saying about the global economy, politics, peace and security, and the global south? Please inform us on our chat box where you're joining us from. We'd love to know. The encyclical Fratelli Tutti, and this webinar came just at a time when we are trying to pull ourselves out of the COVID-19 crisis. God help us. His Holiness Pope Francis believes that the human person is not immune to crises, but always impacted by them. Being better or worse after each one, the Pope has often said, is up to us. So in the mind of Pope Francis, this crisis is an opportunity for us to build back better and ensure no one is left behind. Preparing the future means to acknowledge that things look grim, but since nothing is set in stone, it's worth looking for economical and societal models that will help humanity out of the ongoing crisis. Not by going back to a world of inequalities led by an economy that kills, but by creating a fairer world. We need a new economic model because we have no choice except to develop a model that promotes life both now and in the future. In Fratelli Tutti, His Highness Pope Francis speaks to how we can create a model that is inclusive and sustainable. We can do it. With this in mind, the Vatican's Commission on COVID-19 was set up in April this year at the direction of His Highness Pope Francis. It's trying to answer to the reality we are living and helping humanity in preparing the future. Preparing the future is different from preparing for the future. That implies the future is already determined and we must buy lifesavers because it's going to be terrible. Preparing the future means recognizing our God-given power to imagine and establish a future we want, where all are included and all have life and the life to full. Through the Africa Taskforce for the Vatican COVID-19 Commission that combines Bishop Conference symposia like AMECEA, SECAM, groups of religious men and women in the church like the Jesuits Conference of Africa, the Association of Religious Women in the Church like ACWECA, and the Church in Africa is participating in imagining and preparing that future. The Africa Task Force is collaborating with Working Group 2 of the Vatican Commission, which reflects, analyzes, and proposes relevant and creative approaches to prepare the future through our 4 interconnected task forces: ecology, economics, health, and security. Against this background, and building on Pope Francis' vision of an inclusive global economy, as a framework for eliminating poverty, the Africa Task Force for the Vatican Commission on COVID-19 is hosting this webinar and many more to come to articulate how we can identify grave injustices suffered by the African populations and to explore realistic ways of overcoming them. The central aim of the webinar is to develop a thorough understanding of how injustice survives so that together we can design and implement a targeted reform program to ensure that injustice does not survive. And for this reason, these webinars will bring together policy people, academics, IGO reps, civil society groups, and all men of goodwill. So welcome to this webinar session focused on Fratelli Tutti. What is Pope Francis thinking about the global economy, politics, peace and security, and the global south? To help us in this discussion, we have a very distinguished panel. We are privileged to have among us Mr. Chatterjee, the UN Resident Coordinator, who leads the UN country team to deliver on the UN Development Assistance Framework in Kenya. We are also honored to have Father Augusto Zampini, the Deputy Secretary of Vatican's Department for Integral Human Development and leader of the Vatican Commission on COVID-19, who will give us the keynote address. Father Zampini is a theologian with a killer blend of law and social sciences. We are also privileged to have on our panel other eminent and thought leaders and practitioners. We have Dr. Teresa Wachira, a Catholic religious sister, a university professor of Peace and Security Studies from St. Paul's University, Kenya. We have Ms. Noluthando Honono, a student activist and a final year law student at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. With us today, we have Reverend Father Orobator, an eminent scholar and African theologian, but also the president of the Jesuit Conference of Africa and Madagascar, who is based in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. We also have Reverend Father Henry, who is the Secretary General of the Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar, based in Accra, Ghana. I am honored to be a moderator for today. My name is Serah Thiga, and I'm a communications expert for Kenya. So our format for today will be, this webinar will consist of 1 hour and 50 minutes. We'll receive our opening remarks from Mr. Chatterjee, then a key address note from Reverend Father Augusto Zampini, and that will be followed by a panel discussion. As the moderator, I will facilitate the discussion between the presenters on the main themes. Later on, a Q&A session will follow in the discussion. Welcome to this webinar. Please relax and enjoy. I now wish to give this opportunity to Mr. Chatterjee to open this webinar. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can see me and hear me loudly and clearly.
Yes, we can.
Reverend Father Augusto Zampini, the Adjunct Secretary of the Vatican, the Department of Integral Human Development, the distinguished panel who have come from all over the world who are attending this important seminar, Pope Francis's latest letter on the Fratelli Tutti. Let me start, Reverend Zampini, by coming to the United Nations Charter. And the Charter sends a very clear message to all people. It is about putting people first. In fact, the first words of the Charter, and you know that this is the 75th year of the United Nations, we the people are a summon to people to put people right at the center of our work. People who are in a situation of great anxiety, great trepidation, and a fear of the unknown, given the COVID pandemic, which has overwhelmed not just one part of the world, but the entire world. And therefore, for us, it is an opportunity to pause and rethink our development models. You know, the UN Secretary General has recently said that the world is in pieces and we need world peace. Everywhere in the world, we are seeing some form of localized conflict. People fleeing environmental damage, people fleeing instability, people fleeing conflicts, leaving their homes, crossing the seas, landing in Lampedusa, where countless die in that treacherous sea journey, just for a better life for themselves, their children, and their future generation. Ever since the Second World War, this is the largest displacement of humanity that has ever happened. And therefore, I applaud Pope Francis and with his vision and his heart, which is situation on the plight of migrants and refugees. So I think it becomes even more critical today that we, the people, come together to address these different challenges that we are confronted with. Reverend Zampini, we are here trying to advance the common good while upholding our shared humanity and values. It is with this spirit of our founders that we endeavor to reconnect. And I know that together we can restore and rebuild a world, not just building back better, but to resolve to bring people up and leave no one behind. And that's the basic essence of the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know how many of your audience are aware that Kenya was a leader in making sure that the Sustainable Development Goals actually happen. Together with Ireland and Hungary, they co-convened the entire world in 2013, 14, 15 to make sure that the SDGs became an acceptable norm for the whole world to embrace. And that is how the 17 goals came into place. The first 5 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals is the unfinished business. Goal number 1, ending poverty. Goal number 2, ending hunger. Goal number 3, ensuring everyone has adequate health. Goal number 4, ensuring everyone has education. Goal number 5, ensuring gender equality. And I think the issue of gender equality now assumes even more significance than it ever did. Because without gender equality, we as societies and as civilizations will not advance. That is clear. If you look at post-Second World War Europe and the existence of the Marshall Plan, what did it do? It actually emancipated women. They were able to go and work. Household income started to improve. As a result, children had better access to health, to better education, to better nutrition, to better opportunities. And therefore, an entire human capital came up in Western Europe, which took these countries which had seen the ravages of the First and Second World War, not just come out of deep poverty and depression and violence and instability, into one that then became the new normal of the European Union. And that is precisely the direction that we in Africa must head to. The Africa Free Trade Area is precisely emblematic of what the new Africa should be. Because whatever is happening, the future of humanity is here. Let me give you a concrete example. The median age of Sweden is 47. The median age of Kenya is 18. Sweden and Kenya had the same population in 1956, 7 million. Today, Sweden is 10.9 million. Kenya is 47.6 million. By 2030, Kenya will be 65 million. By 2050, Kenya will be 100 million. By 2050, Africa will be 2.3 billion. By 2050, there'll be 850 million young people in this continent. What can we do to harness this young demography? And that will come when we invest in an Africa which is the future producers and the future consumers, because all of Europe is aging. All of the Asian tigers is aging. New markets have to be found. A new collaboration has to be formed. A new compact which overcomes barriers of race and religion and attitudes. Now is that moment where ever before that we need the leadership of the Catholic Church to advance the spirit of humanity, to advance the spirit of compassion. And this it must do by bringing across the spectrum political leaders, because ultimately change happens when there is political will. And the influence that the church has in advancing and making sure there is velocity in that political will is huge. So the new trajectory that we need to take, given the fact that today we are in the midst of a pandemic which rivals the Great Depression of the 1930s. We are seeing a pandemic which has challenged science. We have seen a pandemic which came out like a bolt of lightning and suddenly put in front of all of us the inequality that we've remained silent about. And that inequality exists from the poorest to the richest. And therefore, the new appetite of humanity has to be one of compassion and embracing each other, because without that, we will continue to see the scourge of violent extremism, of terror, of all forms of localized conflicts, because it is also becoming one of a conflict, a competition for resources. There are parts of Somalia and northeastern Kenya, southern Ethiopia, where we continue to see people and tribes fight each other over scarce water because the environment is in great crisis. The wisdom and the leadership of the Pope is even more important today than it was ever before, because we are facing an environmental existentialist crisis. Father Zampini, I come from Calcutta. It's in West Bengal in India. I come from the same city that Mother Teresa worked in. This is a gift from Mother Teresa to me. I was a young captain in the Indian Army, and I'd just come back from a very, very difficult conflict, highly violent. And my mother said, look, why don't you just pause and go meet Mother Teresa, because my mother happened to know her. And I went and worked with her for 1 month in Calcutta. And she worked, as you know, with orphans and people who suffered from leprosy. That exposure made me realize, when I was thinking, I was seeing all the difficulties and all the challenges of the world, I learned the first lessons of selflessness there, of real selflessness, of real compassion, of real love. No politics, no, camouflaging of a particular agenda. It was pure. And perhaps that is the moment that we need to capture today. The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations has said that the COVID-19 pandemic is not just a health emergency. It's a humanitarian emergency. It's a development emergency. Can we then come together as the UN family, the churches of all configurations, the mosques, the temples, the religious leaders of all faiths, unite together and purposefully drive human development, because we just have 10 years to achieve the sustainable development goals. And this has to be a decade of action. If we can make sure just the first 5 goals, which are the unfinished business, we would have taken humanity to the next step of advancement. We would have saved the environment, and we could actually grow together to advance the spirit, the human spirit of selflessness, of love, of compassion, and of caring. Thank you.
That was so powerful, Mr. Chatterjee. And your message really aligns with the encyclical by His Holiness, Pope Francis, because he talks about advancing the spirit of compassion. That even today, as we see, we live in a quite unstable world, and wars are coming, and elections are, with even our superpower country today. and we feel the world feels unstable almost. So I think this is such a quite timely conversation. I see on our comment section that we have Mr. Robert Della, and a journalist. We have Mr. Eddie Para from Ghana. Thank you and welcome. Here I see Kelly Michelos talking about brilliant idea to link today's discussion on Pope's letter with the UN goals. The church cannot do it alone, but with massive mobilization, we can change the world order of improving life. Thank you so much for your comments. Please continue giving us your comments on the chat box, and I will read it as we continue our discussion. I would like to now welcome our keynote speaker, our Reverend Father Augusto Zampini. He's the Deputy Secretary of the Vatican's Department for Integral Human Development and the leader of the Vatican Commission on COVID-19. Welcome, Father.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for the invitation, for organizing this, and thank you also for Father Charles and all his colleagues for accepting being part of the Vatican COVID Commission. I'm delighted to say that the papers that the African COVID team has sent so far are absolutely excellent, fantastic, and we are now going to try to see how can we spread it all around the world. But thank you very much to all of them who are contributing, and to all our brothers and sisters from Africa who are contributing in this important task. Oh, I noticed that now I'm Father Augusto Zampini, because before I was. But it's a shame, because I wish I could be like Father Orobator.
Hello, Father Zampini.
And such a great audience. I would present a bit of a background of the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, particularly to link it with Laudato Si, because the risk is to think that Fratelli Tutti is, well, now it's new, and Laudato Si is old. So I will present a bit of a background so that you can build up on that or follow up on that. And then some points on what I've been asked regarding the injustices or contributions that can come out from the Global South. So so for that, I will share the screen. Okay. No, please no. Sorry, I'll share the screen. Can you see it, Sarah?
Yes, yes, we can see it. We can see it.
So, so as I said, the connection with Fratelli Tutti is a consistency in Pope Francis' papacy and magisterium that I would say is like a trilogy inspired by Saint Francis. Let us remind ourselves that Pope Francis is the first Pope in being called Francis, and he was inspired by this saint. There is another saint from Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Mr. Chatterjee, that I met her also. I had the privilege to meet her in Calcutta because I worked 1 month for her there. So thank you very much for your kind words and a reminder of Mother Teresa. But this is another saint, no, from the 12th and 13th century, Saint Francis of Assisi. And he was a saint that started thinking that he had to reform the church, because at that time the church was a bit focused on wealth, but then discovered the love for all creation, and he created a special understanding of community, no, which is, so he's the saint of fraternal openness, of love, and of peace. And it comes as no surprise that the three main documents, it's not that the others are not important, but these are the three pillars upon which the other documents are also, they have also been written. It comes as no surprise that the three pillars in St. Francis papacy are to go. And I want the church in all her beings and action to work for integral human development, for this new model of development that Mr. Chatterjee was talking about. So it's not just, this is not just for justice and peace commissions, for Caritas, for my dicastery. This is for all the church, no? The church that reaches out, that is not trapped in the sacristy, that is like a field hospital. All these images are described in Evangelii Gaudium. And then Pope Francis of Assisi, Laudato Si o mi Signore, and Pope Francis, Bishop of Rome, between caring for our common home and a new model of development, and a new model of politics where love is possible, and also the contribution of spirituality. All that is further explained in Fratelli Tutti, but also Saint Francis of Assisi said Fratelli Tutti, referring to all my brothers and sisters, the first phrase of Fratelli Tutti, because we cannot care for our common home, neither repair any church, and dialogue. So you can see the consistency of the Pope's magisterium, but you cannot understand Fratelli Tutti without Laudato Si. There are the two siblings, the two sisters, social encyclicals, the latest social encyclicals, and this is triggered by an apostolic exhortation to the whole church, that is Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. But also both documents, Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, they have I would say, an ecumenical and interreligious approach. Laudato Si was launched with Patriarchal Bartholomew, and Fratelli Tutti was inspired and launched with the right hand of the Grand Imam Ahmad head. So with Pope Francis sisters, in order to promote integral ecology, because social and ecological issues are connected. And from Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib, Pope Francis takes the Universal Fraternity document that they signed last year, where religious traditions can contribute a lot to the disrupted world that we have. And Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti says, is calling to respond with a new vision. What he provides is a new vision. A vision that is based on Laudato Si and on Evangelii Gaudium. It's a vision of a church. We should be at the center of the economy, but not at the ecosystem. No? And on Fratelli Tutti, where we are all brothers and sisters, regardless of race, borders, cultures, etc., because we all need to. We are all incomplete. We all need to be completed by each other in dialogue and as equals. No? So the contribution, I would say, that both documents bring, as I said before, based on Pope Francis, it's also important particularly for Africa and for Latin America and for other parts of the world, because the Pope is not just referring to previous documents of his predecessors, of other popes, but in both documents he refers to lots of conference of bishops and other documents. And this is the synodality vision of Pope Francis. Synodality that is based on all the other documents, on post-synodal documents, no, about the family, about young people, about the Amazon, etc. But the important thing is we cannot do. There's no wisdom that can be left out, and wisdom coming from the South is very important because it's very rich, it's very creative, and it's also both documents, although they're written for everybody, they're unashamedly Christian because they bring the best of Christian tradition out, and they propose it as a basis for a dialogue with others in order to enrich all, to care for the planet and to promote a peaceful society. And this is what, for me, is a fantastic understanding of what is proper tradition, what is the Christian identity. No? And both ends with two prayers, one universal and another Christian. So you can see the parallels of these documents that needs to be understood together, because let us be honest, it's not that we have already implemented the SDGs, as Mr. Chatterjee was saying, or we have already cared for our common home. We are still destroying it. No? But then we have to also care for, we have to balance this. If we have a common home that we need to care, we need to treat each other as a common family, as sisters and brothers. So they have used the two encyclicals, the two documents are sisters, in order to understand what the Pope is trying to say. Then what is the Pope seeing, or the Pope with other bishops' conference, with other sisters, with other congregations, institutions? Well, in Laudato Si, he's listening or saying the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Look at this picture. We can the ones who contribute the least to the problem. But therefore, the social injustices and ecological injustices go hand in hand. We have to address it together. In Fratelli Tutti, what does he see? He sees a dark and closed world that is enclosing, not because the nationalisms are rising up, religious fundamentalism is in the rise. With the best science and with others. And redemption, we can see that everything that God created is good. And if we can tune into that, if we can contemplate the beauty of creation, then we can care for it. Or because we can see how horrible it is that the way we are treating creation, and we are distorting everything that God created as good and entrusted us to care for. And also the redemption, because we are redeemed beings, that we are supposed to move along with the rest of creation till the end of time. So this is what he sees from. And in Laudato Si, the Pope says something very, very important, that we need to till and to keep the earth. We need to work it and to conserve it. No? We know that in Africa, in Latin America, you cannot work it and destroy the source of your work. But equally, so it's not just ecology conservation, neither social work. We need to bring both together. I mean, and this is right from the book of Genesis, but also the other verb, the book of Genesis, is this domination. Not that God created human beings, men and women, and then he entrusted us to dominate the earth. And he said, domination has to be understood as treating the earth in the name of God, as serving it and loving it. It's not to do whatever we want. So, and look at what we have created now is a culture of domination and extraction. And what the Pope proposes is a culture of love, of service, and value creation. And look at this, we extract from the earth, no, and then we throw away what we extract. So it's a culture of extraction and throw away, and the Pope wants a culture of care value creation, and a circular way of living, or producing, or conceiving our economy. And we have created a culture of indifference, and he wants a culture of encounter. And this is much explained or developed in Fratelli Tutti. There's an entire chapter that with the parallel of the Good Samaritan. And I know that my friend, Father Orobator, will be delighted, because we discussed with him a long time ago that the parallel of the Good Samaritan is not an individualistic text. Like Margaret Thatcher used to quote the parallel of the Good Samaritan to promote neoliberalism. Whereas the parallel of the Good Samaritan is to say that the way you behave, you become a brother or a sister, and that's why you got enriched. Otherwise, if you walk along and you ignore the others, or you are assaulting others, you cannot thrive as a human being. It's impossible. So it's not that who are the poor things as an object that I need to help, but who are behaving as neighbors, who are behaving as brothers and sisters. How are we creating community? The whole Fratelli Tutti is community creation, because we are communal beings, we are social beings, we are political beings, and that's why love is communitary, is a community. Love is about social, it's about society, love is about politics. And we have understood love as just me and you and me. No. Love is about the community that we can create or what we can destroy. And you can see the discernment, wonderful, absolutely fantastic chapter on the Good Samaritan. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. But then also in the light of the tradition, in Laudato Si, we have this wonderful idea of integral ecology, where the Pope said, ecology is not just environmentalism, it's about the web of life. And we are also part of the web of life, human beings. So it's about caring for nature and caring for society together. That means culture, that means economics, that means politics, that means education, that means spirituality, all linked with a care for creation. But also in Fratelli Tutti, he had the contribution of the tradition is an open and fraternal world, not a closed world, neither a closed church, neither a creation of enmity or conflicts, just because we want more power or we want to dominate others. We want to dominate the earth, we want to dominate others. We use the others as resources, human resources or natural resources. No, everybody has a value and importance, an open and fraternal world. And he explains a little bit this, but how to create this. So of course, in both encyclicals, he provides lines of actions. The Pope and the ones who are participating in the COVID Commission, they know that when he created the COVID Commission, he called us and said, in Italian, he said, per favore, concretezza. We have been discussing this for ages. This is the time, the crisis, the COVID crisis that has exacerbated the social crisis and the environmental crisis. This is the time to change society once and for all, and to change it in a way that we can be all brothers and sisters, not just some more brothers and sisters than others, like the book of George Orwell. No, we can be all brothers and sisters, and especially starting from the least, and we can care for our common home. This is the time. This crisis is an opportunity to do it. So the lines of action in Laudato Si are socioeconomic, education, spirituality. It's a prophetic model of development. And the lines of action in Fratelli Tutti is universal love in politics, meaning a new multilateralism, a better multilateralism, the importance of cultures, and the importance of religions, because religions can be a source of wealth creation, of cultural strength, and of political love. So it's a prophetic, one is a prophetic development model, the other is a prophetic political. And I would focus a little bit more on Fratelli Tutti. The lines of action, the Pope likes to play with words. He likes to invent words, but he says, look at what beautiful is. The vision is a universal horizon but with local flavor. And he calls localization and globalization. No? So yes to globalization insofar as it strengthens local, but not to a local thing that thinks that they're so wonderful that they don't need any other culture, that they don't need other neighbors. No, this is the rise of nationalism. No, then a better kind of politics and social dialogue for a new culture, where we need to be peace builders, but beginning with the last. This is important. The option for the poor, and the preferential destination of the goods are key to understand Fratelli Tutti. Otherwise, we are whitewashing the message of the Pope, no? Because otherwise we cannot be peace builder, because the conflicts are promoted in great part because of the oppression of the poor, because of the oppression of poor countries, because of the destruction of natural resources, the natural goods, etc. But also he brings something that is quite interesting. He reminds us the need to forgive, as I delighted that Mr. Chatterjee was mentioning, not this, the compassion, or we call it forgiveness, but he says, but not to forgive doesn't mean to forget. Or if we remember, we have to remember, of course, with the eyes of God, but we cannot forget. And this is so important for the African history, isn't it? And for Latin America, because we cannot forget colonization. Okay, we can forgive, but we cannot forget, because otherwise we have a new colonization. and we are having new colonizations in different subtle models. So yes, to forgive, but not to forget, because historical memory is important to create a better and just future. And then he explicitly say, well, no more to war. With the weapons that we have now, it's very difficult to justify war, especially with nuclear weapons. And we cannot be brothers and sisters if we still believe in death penalty. I mean, no. But then he ended up with the role of religions, about very important for integral development, not just to dialogue about our faith. So how our faith can influence this new future that Serah was inviting us to think about at the beginning. I will skip that, and I will go to something specific. I will spend my last minute something specific about the global South related to Fratelli Tutti. The first one about economics. No, he explicitly criticized neoliberalism. In Laudato Si, he was mentioning the technocratic society or technocratic paradigm, which is, of course, the connection between the ones who are the owners of new technologies, which are the ones ruling finance, which are the ones that rule economy, and the ones ruling politics, and the ones who think that technofix is okay, you know. But here he is more explicit. He says, neoliberalism is a dogma that is running out of ideas, is repeating them itself, and we have never seen any solution. And we know that in Latin America. I'm from Latin America, just for those who don't know. And we know that from Africa. Am I not right? We all know. Neoliberalism is a dogma because it's not working. That doesn't mean that we don't trust in the freedom of the individual, but what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be free? It's ridiculous to think that we are free if only some can be free. Or no, and not or free are the ones who have, and the ones who have not, we not be free. For example, healthcare. Can I really be free if I don't have healthcare? Can I really be free if I cannot migrate, or cannot visit other countries? Can I really be free if I don't have any opinion or participation in my society? So you see, neoliberalism. We have to, the market model of neoliberalism is running out of ideas. So we need to create something new. The same we can say of populism. Populism, he clarifies, because the Pope was accused by the neoliberalists to be a populist, no? And but populism, he says, as neoliberalism is the distortion of liberty or of the human dignity, populism is the distortion of our conception of people, because we are people. I am not an individual by myself. I am Augusto, thanks to the people where I was brought up. I would be completely different if I was born in Kenya. So I am who I am, thanks to my culture and to the population. We are social beings. So because and the notion of people, he says, is not necessarily logic. He says it's a mystical category. The mystical category, which is a historical category, but it goes, it transcends the notion of individualism. No? So individualism, he says, is a virus. It's a virus. It's worse than the coronavirus because it kills. Individualism deceive doesn't make us free, doesn't make us equal, doesn't make us fraternal. And how to cure this notion of individualism? Not with populism, because populism is the corruption of people in the name of power. No populism, but yes, the popular understanding of the person, the cultural understanding of the person, the social understanding of the person. You are the experts in Africa about this. So your contribution on Fratelli Tutti on this, you should bang on to the entire world, no? About this, and you have to teach us how to be a people without respecting the human dignity, but without the virus of individualism. Or we have to cure also the virus of populism, that are demagogues, leaders, distorting populism. No, and this is why in many countries in Africa and Latin America we are still poor, because well, not the only reason, but it's one reason. So yes to democracy, yes to participation, yes to becoming a people that walks in the history. And that's why I put another thing, that is the economy. Francesco, I don't know if you know that this year we were supposed to have an encounter in Assisi with 3,000 people from all over the world, young people, to promote a new economy in every single aspect of economics. Now we couldn't do that because of the coronavirus, but now we are working with these young people online all over the world, and we will continue to do it in order to promote a new economy that is neither populist nor neoliberal, but conceives communities and respects human dignity and freedom. The second thing that I want to mention is health, because we cannot thrive without health, and we can see this with the virus, with the pandemic. But health is not just physical, it is physical, first and foremost, of course. But there's a lot of problems of mental health at the moment. We have millions of people, I mean, with mental health problems, particularly in the north, I don't know, but also in the south. I mean, the anxiety, Mr. Chatterjee mentioned this, no? The anxiety that we, the people, are a bit anxious because we don't know what's going on. So we have to be careful about treating health only as physical. There's also a mental dimension, but health, again, this is important for Fratelli Tutti. Health is not just me going to the doctor or me trying. Health is about public health. It comes as no coincidence that the countries who have invested the most in public health in the last decade are the ones who are dealing better with the pandemic. The countries who have divested from public health, they're having even more problems, even the rich countries. It's not a coincidence. And here there's no distinction. So health is public, because a virus teaches us that if my neighbor is with a virus, I am not free because I cannot go out. If the guy who is begging at my door has the virus, I cannot go out because I will. Well, this is what a tiny little thing is teaching us. A tiny terrible thing that the coronavirus is teaching us, something obvious, that the health is public. It's not just my health, my mental illness, it's about public health, because this responds to the public or communal dimension of our being. No? For some reason, Christians, our center is the communion. No? So public health is very important. Of course, for public health, we need policies and we need investments. And if the majority of the investment comes from public money, therefore, this should end up in public goods, in the common good, not just in the good of the elite. The elite can pay for the health. The problem is for those who cannot pay. So, but ideally, we should have a public health system for all. And the last thing is the security. So, of course, we cannot talk about security if we don't talk about participation and dialogue. But please, I cannot go on because I'm running out of time, but Fratelli Tutti is not saying, let us dialogue, how lovely, let us have a chat, which, no. Pope Francis is saying, we cannot dialogue because some people, they do not have even a voice. So, no, I mean, even countries, he's saying, listen, we need multilateralism, but multilateralism is co-opted by the most powerful countries in the world. No, let's have a proper dialogue when we can discuss, we can enrich each other by the logos of the other. But this, we have to talk about power in order to talk about dialogue. You see, we have to sort out the issues of power and domination. If I'm talking with you, with Serah, I mean, now she is in power. She has the power of this webinar. So I cannot talk with her because she can say your time is over, and I have no saying. You see, that's not a dialogue. A dialogue is when we have some equality, and this is when Pope Francis talks about dialogue. He's putting the finger on power. Please, it's not just how happy dialogue, no, and dialogue is enriching, it's always enriching. Otherwise, it's not dialogue. It's not just, you see, how do we dialogue now? We are listening and we are already thinking in the answer before listening to what the other is. We are hearing, not listening. Or in social media, we are shouting. The Pope mentioned this. We are being aggressive in the social, Catholic people. I mean, this is not promoting dialogue. And without dialogue, we cannot have proper governance and security. The other is nuclear weapons. So the Pope has been talking a lot about nuclear weapons during his 7 years of papacy. And people were saying, well, but this is something that the Pope has said in a conference or in one visit to Japan. And now he's saying this in an encyclical, which is the highest rank of a document for a Pope. And he's saying, there is no way that we can justify the use and the possession of nuclear weapons. Because before it was about, now with the nuclear weapons linked with new technology, with the ones we have, we can destroy the entire world. With the ones that we are creating, why do we need that? And can you believe that in times of COVID, when we need massive investment in public health, the most powerful countries are investing trillions of dollars in nuclear weapons? Today, I'm not saying today. Can you believe it? Is it not irrational that? Why do we need new nuclear weapons? And non-sophisticated weapons to destroy? Why do we invest in something that creates value rather than in something that can destroy everything, can destroy an entire planet? No to nuclear weapons. And the same with death penalty. Yes, we can create justice, but to think that to eliminate someone, we are doing justice, well, that doesn't sound good. So the Global South actually have a lot to say, particularly on the ecological debt. Remember, this is in Laudato Si. We don't need to forget this. The ecological debt, okay, countries are trapped in the debt. That's why they cannot get out. So we have to talk about, in the African team for COVID, they have explained this beautifully in a very, very short and sharp paper. They said we cannot get out of a crisis if we have to ask for more debt, and we are already overwhelmed with debt, and it's too expensive, the debt that we have to ask. So but there's some ecological debt that we haven't calculated yet. That is, they have used our natural resources, again, resources in inverted commas, to enrich themselves, while we are impoverishing it, and we believe that deserves some compensation. So the compensation could come from the technological sharing and the way that we can develop in Africa, in Latin America and Asia, in a different way that Europe and the States they have developed. Then political interdependence. We are interdependent, but this doesn't translate into solidarity. So how can we transform multilateralism into a proper family of nations? We can contribute a lot with that. Religious contribution and peace. We are experiencing war and peace because in the name of religion, we create peace. We create wars in Africa and Latin America. So it is the time to put religions at the service of peace with the ones who don't think like us, but they do believe in peace. And also the economic development, and for example, the vaccine development. How this, I would say this very, very shortly, happy to discuss it further. There's a new possibility of arms race but not with weapons, but with biological weapons. One could be the vaccine. So if one country have the ownership of all the vaccines, so that will be, I am in power of the world. Be aware of this. We are working in the Vatican COVID Commission also, and hopefully we will work with the African team about this. But these are the things that the Global South should be aware of, the international debt and the ecological linking with ecological debt. How can we position our countries in the new multilateralism that we need? How can we, because Africa is still a religious country, the continent is, but how can we push this religious energy into peace building and the new ecological development, being aware that some things behind could be difficult? In a nutshell, the Pope wants us to dream together. Not just when he talks about dreams, this is something I have to clarify, because in Querida Amazonia it's the same. When he talks about dreams, it's not an individual dream, it's a biblical dream. It's a communitarian dream. It's something where you dream and you act, like St. Joseph. It's not like, I would wish, it's not a wish. A dream is something that it could be done because we dream together as a single human family, as fellow travelers with the same flesh, as children of the same earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Father Zampini. I truly enjoyed your presentation, and I enjoyed how you, side by side, you compared Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. I continue to marvel at the Fratelli Tutti because it's one of the documents that really connect with what is happening today, and especially in terms of health, because COVID-19 came to test the infrastructures, especially the health infrastructures that have been set up by countries. And like you said, I just chime in with you that that is what was tested this year. Are they strong enough? Are they powerful enough to be able to support its people? And immediately I wish to jump in and welcome our first panelist, Father Orobator. Karibu sana. This is Swahili for meaning welcome. His Holiness Pope Francis has urged the world to adopt a better kind of politics. And I wish to hear your own thoughts about what more did you decode from the encyclical, and even perhaps indulge us by sharing with us how the politics of the global north affects Africa, the south, and the entire world. And what exactly does it mean for Africa and South when it comes to the politics and economics of the East, especially China included? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thiga. I appreciate the invitation to be part of this conversation, but let me also thank very especially Mr. Chatterjee for your very inspiring contribution, especially for your personal testimony that I found very moving. And of course, thank you, Father Augusto Zampini. Good to see you again. But again, thank you for laying out the framework of Fratelli Tutti. And there's so much that can still be distilled from this rich document. And as Ms. Thiga just said, I was asked to focus on Pope Francis's teaching on politics. And I'm quoting the brief that I got. It says, tell us what the Pope is saying about politics as it applies to Africa and to the global governance, including the politics of the global north, and how that affects Africa, the South, and the entire world. And it continues, if you still have some room, you could speak to the politics and economics of the East, China included, and what that means for Africa or the South. And then the brief says, well, you have exactly 15 minutes to do this. Well, I'll have to be a magician to achieve that feat. But anyway, let me follow up on some of the things that Father Zampini has just laid out so beautifully for us. As I believe that Fratelli Tutti highlights several features of politics, not only as it applies to Africa, the global South, or the developing world, as they say, but as applies to the entire global arrangement. And the one thing that stands out for me as I consider these futures is the widespread vacancy, lack, deficiency of credible, competent political leadership, the kind that is capable of doing exactly what Pope Francis wants it to do in Fratelli Tutti, that is promote integral human development, promote social transformation and change, promote human flourishing. And as Father Zampini just pointed out, the current predominant models of political engagement and economic arrangement, all of them fall woefully short of Pope Francis's ideal of politics as a vocation of charity. I think this is something that we need to pay particular attention to. Politics as a vocation of charity. So just think about it, again, following up on what Father Zampini has just laid out for us. Think of the various pathologies of politics and economics across the globe today. We've just heard about populism, liberalism, neoliberalism, nationalism. You see, between the short-sightedness of populism, as we just heard, and the reductionism and the redundancy of neoliberalism, you can discover already that the cost of our present political and economic arrangement are incalculable. And who bears the brunt? Who pays this cost? Pope Francis is very clear. It's the poor, it's the vulnerable, it's the fragile. They bear the brunt, they pay the cost. And you know, here in Africa, the church has not been oblivious of this deficiency of political leadership. I remember in 2009, when we had the Synod of Bishops, the bishops recognized categorically, and I'm quoting the text now, that Africa needs saints in high political office. Africa needs saintly politicians. And why? Because the bishops also recognize in that synod, and I'm quoting, that many Catholics in high office today have fallen woefully short in their performance in office. And so the synod calls on such people to repent or quit the political arena and stop causing havoc to the people and giving the Catholic Church a bad name, end of quote. So you see, in that vision, politics can cause havoc to people. And that's the point. You know, there is a common saying where I come from that politics is a dirty game. And that's exactly what Francis says in Fratelli Tutti. He says that the word itself is distasteful. It has become distasteful, unpalatable. And yet, for me, the question is not whether politics is dirty or distasteful. The critical issue is that the cost of the present arrangement is too high for vulnerable and poor people. And we know that this is for several reasons. First, and as we've just heard, that politics as we know it today serves the needs and interests of the elites, of the privileged classes, and it simply marginalizes, excludes the poor and the vulnerable. And there's another reason, and this is even worse, that politics simply eviscerates, distorts the very word people. And I don't want to go more into this because I think Father Zampini has brilliantly explained this, that people is not about logic, about transaction. It's something more mystical. And of course, the thing that comes to mind here is the whole idea of Ubuntu that we talk about in Africa, that's been popularized by people like Desmond Tutu. Ubuntu, the fact that as a people, human existence comes to fulfillment when we recognize the mutuality of one another, when we affirm the dignity of one another, not as individuals or what Pope Francis calls monads, but as communities, Now that's the kind of thing that the present political arrangement, especially under the rubric of populism, has destroyed completely. But there's a third and a more serious reason why this arrangement doesn't work, and that is the predatory nature of politics. Because anywhere you look, politics has become a means for appropriating resources. As Zampini was just saying, for extracting resources and value for myself by marginalizing others. I see Noluthando on the screen. She could tell us about state capture in South Africa. And Pope Francis talks about, for example, of selfishness, or what he called concupiscence. That is that overriding concern with only myself, only my interests, only my group. And people, the vast majority of people, become simply expedient and expendable object in this rabid pursuit of power. So the point is, if you go by the analysis of Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti, there is no question that the current arrangement is deficient, is not sustainable, it's basically unjust. It's unjust. And so we need new models of politics in the world, not just in the global South, in the globe. And this is what I find fascinating. And my fear is that we might begin to think of this in sentimental terms, and then it just lies there. I think this is the point that Father Zampini has already underlined. It's not about sentimentality. When the Pope talks about new models of politics, politics with a heart, politics that is healthy, a better kind of politics, that's not sentimentality. He's actually, when you look at it, what he's proposing is not something that is diametrically opposed to what we have now. Actually, he's offering us something new, something different, something that hasn't been tried, something that he believes is workable. And let me show how I understand this. That it's not just about sentimentality. How might politics with a heart, how might politics that is healthy, how might it change the situation? How might that happen? Well, when we talk about charity, we're talking about engaging in concrete deeds that make a difference in the lives of people. So the idea of political charity and social love, whether at local level or global level, it's a real invitation to try something new and something different. And what can we expect from this? What can political charity deliver? What can social love deliver as the inspiration of political charity? When you read Fratelli Tutti, and as Father Zampini has said, connecting it with Laudato Si, it's very clear. Political charity focuses on serving the common good, not individual interests as we know it today. It doesn't create a society that is the sum of the individual interests. It creates a society that is fraternal. In other words, that is inclusive. And again, as I said, it's not just sentimentality, there's concreteness to this idea of political charity. Political charity works to provide a dignified life for all citizens through work. Think about it. How many people are without work today? And as Mr. Chatterjee said, what about the bulging youth population of the global South without work? That's the focus of political charity. Not creating value for the elite, but creating a dignified life through work for the majority. And it's a political arrangement that seeks to build communities. Again, think of Ubuntu, that is mutual, that is respectful of the dignity of one another. And I could go on because the Pope talks about eliminating social conditions of suffering, preferential option for those in greatest needs. Anything that threatens or violates fundamental human rights is a fair game for the focus of political charity. So as you see, Pope Francis is inviting us to a new kind of political arrangement. And you might wonder, how might this happen? Well, just imagine for once, if we listen to what Pope is saying, imagine for once that politicians were actually people who love. That's not a language we usually associate with people in political vocation, love. Imagine that these were people who actually love, and that politics was conducted by people who love, not just lust for power. This is what the African Synod calls saintly politicians. And you know, if that were the case, it would mean that rather than sacrifice people for personal interest and gains, politics would actually make sacrifices. Or as Pope Francis says, would actually create room, make room for everybody, and create a world where everybody has a place, where everybody is recognized as a sister and as a brother. It would actually promote a form of social friendship that is inclusive of everyone. But let's get a bit practical. For this to happen, I believe we can't simply sit back and recite the rosary. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe in prayer, and I do find occasion to pray. But this kind of political charity and social friendship will not come about by simply adopting a devotional silence or inactivity. There has to be an element of advocacy built into it. I feel that Pope Francis is actually giving us the license to go out and create this kind of arrangement. Not wait for other people to do it, but to actually begin to experiment with it. So imagine if we had an advocacy framework that actually invites people in political vocation to begin to do an examination of conscience, to begin to experience conversion by simply asking simple questions like, how much love did I put into my work? What did I do for the progress of my people? What mark did I leave in the life of society? What real bonds did I create? What positive forces did I unleash? How much social peace did I sow? What good did I achieve in the position that was entrusted to me? Think about this as an element of advocacy that calls politicians and leaders to an examination of conscience, to a conversion. And by the way, those are not my words. Those are words from Fratelli Tutti. So you see, Pope Francis is actually offering us a new model that I believe is overdue and urgent, not only in Africa or Latin America or the global South, but across the globe. And as you think about it, politics with a heart, politics that loves, I ask you, is this sensible or stupid? Is this naive or utopian? You be the judge. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Father Orobator. That was quite powerful. I see our chat box is flowing in with glamorous recommendations from our attendees. Father Zampini, I hope you can see people interacting with you at the chat box. Very powerful. I see Samuel says that it's very profound statement about advocacy as faith action, almost at all the level of devotional prayer. We need more guidance. How can this be made more practical? I see also people recommending and giving glamorous recommendation to also Mr. Chatterjee and also Father Orobator and Father Augusto from Sister Jane Wakahio. Thank you so much for engaging with us. I wish to invite our next panelist, Miss Noluthando. Noluthando, as a young lawyer, what does His Highness Pope Francis refer to when he warned us against the culture of walls? He says that there are dark clouds over our closed world. We have so many things going on, like unemployment and pandemic and racism and poverty and slavery and trafficking. And do you think that we can repair our world as we prepare for a just post-COVID world? What are your thoughts? Welcome.
Thank you, Serah. Before I get into it, I have been preceded by quite a bit of power, so much respect to the speakers that precede me. The question that's been posed to me is one that is quite loaded, firstly. But secondly, it's one that is in different ways needs response from all walks of life, from very different people, in order for us to get to the core of it. What I can only do is to simply scratch the surface by responding to my own personal view of it in reference to Fratelli Tutti. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I think when we're talking about this particular aspect, the first thing to note is that a lot of the issues that have been spoken about and that continue to be spoken about are ones that are rooted in bureaucracy. So a lot of things in relation to politics and economics are all based on very specific laws, very specific ideologies, and very specific mechanisms of maintaining them that exist to empower the systems that are already in place to ensure that those very systems don't lose their continuity. So in order to change a constitution, you need a 2/3 majority to change a particular thing. You need a certain number of votes from a certain seating within those political arenas in order for you to be able to gain that kind of leverage to move beyond a particular point. So if you're talking about the 25th section of the South African Constitution about property, you need a vote in the National Assembly, but you also need a vote in the National Council of Provinces. In order for you to be able to make those changes, you need to go through all sorts of circles in order for you to get to that level of power, really, to get to a change. The thing about bureaucracy, though, is that at the same time, it seeks to protect the good aspects of these systems. So this is to say that where the system is supposed to assist in ensuring that people have access, be it to healthcare, be it to education, be it to protections from the state, all those things can be done under that bureaucracy because the requirement exists. The problem becomes a willingness to utilize what is given in terms of access and even in terms of powers to get to that very outcome, which is not something that actually happens as a result of several things, including corruption, including history, including the capacity to make these things happen. So when I'm talking about corruption, I mean, we're referring to the use of the concept of common good and how we define that common good as being contextual. So in South Africa, common good looks like responding to the immediate problem, which would be problems caused as a result of the history of South Africa, and as such have to be responded to. The question then becomes, what becomes the greatest level of good that you can gain when you act in a particular way? The definition of that good then comes down to who has the power to enact that good at a given point in time. So if you are in the presidency, if good in the presidency looks like being able to garner enough support for the next term, then that is the definition of good that we're going with. And that's the definition that we're then going to utilize in order for us to be able to measure how much good we were able to do. The problem with this, though, is that as soon as you place that level of context to common good, what you do is that you restrict it. You restrict the ability to extend beyond what you have chosen as the definition of common good, and as such are incapable of being able to move beyond those restrictions in a way that is going to be effective in getting the most effect for individuals who are further away from your line of sight. That means that when you are a part of the Nigerian police force, SARS, and you are not part of the protests to end that, the common good for you at that point in time is to pick up a pistol and shoot at someone because they're taking away the aspect that you consider to be good. Still, a definition of good that doesn't necessarily speak to whether or not it transcends beyond your line of sight. The same can be said if we're talking about Zimbabwean Lives Matter and who considers a particular aspect of the Zimbabwean politics to be good. That in and of itself becomes something that's a problem. And here is when we need discernment. This is the point where we then require a little bit more than just our general understanding of things, where we need to search beyond ourselves as individuals. And this has been a very clear continuous thing within this session, that individualism here becomes a problem because it doesn't allow us to be able to transcend beyond ourselves and look at common good as being a universal issue as opposed to one that speaks to the context that we exist within. And so in that space, discernment becomes important. And this is where encyclicals like Fratelli Tutti become important, because they speak directly to whether or not we're able to access that higher level of insight, but beyond that, a higher level of action when it comes to ensuring that that definition of common good that is universal is one that we strive towards. The second thing that I think is important, and this speaks to whether or not we're able to respond to things like youth unemployment and we're able to respond to issues of things like African governance, is the understanding and the use of our historical, our memory of history, right? Because it's important to note that colonization happened. It's important to note that the various effects thereof are continuous. However, the continued strife of people is not something that can only be placed on that particular aspect of history, because what has happened since has not been a strive for a level of continued development to a degree that allows us to be able to get the best form of response from governance. So this looks like liberation groupings or liberation parties taking over governance when governance was never really part of the agenda in the first place. Just because you happen to be a liberation movement does not mean that you are then able to govern, and that becomes one of the bigger problems, because what then ends up being an existing thing is that savior complex, that because we've saved you from the situation, liberated you, we then become your masters at that point in time, which changes the whole concept and idea of what that is supposed to be about. The same can be said about youth unemployment when we begin to tell young people that you're unemployed, so start a business. That's not how it works. How it works is that if you're starting a business, it happens to be because you are equipped in being able to start a business. It also means that you have a market that you can be able to have that business exist within. It also means that you have the necessary kind of space that allows you to be able to deal with the things that exist within that business ideal, right? Where you need education in order for you to be able to understand how that works, where you're going to need various aspects to come together in order for you to make that a success. The same thing happens with education. We can give people access, but if we don't give them the ability to gain success from that, it essentially means that that access in and of itself is something that is futile. This means taking a girl child to school is also something that is going to mean that you need to give them the stationery that they need. They're going to need to have the ability to get to school on an everyday basis, such that that girl child and all the other issues related to gender are able to, from a young age, still be dealt with without necessarily having to respond to them at the point where we're talking about a fees must fall protest at a later stage of those individuals' lives. And I think the problem is also just a level of not having the necessary foresight to be able to deal with these kind of things, because no one is looking at trying to respond to things before they become problems. The next thing that I want to look at before I run out of time is the discussion on international politics and policy and how that policy affects Africa and young people in Africa specifically. Because the biggest problem that we have is assuming that simply because we've moved away from colonization, we are at a position where we're able to interact with the global north in a way that is going to be equitable. It doesn't work like that. You don't just wake up the next morning and be able to bargain with the United States as South Africa. It doesn't work that way. The truth is, when we're looking at these types of policies that come into play, a lot of the time, at the back end of them, Africans or third world countries are always going to be at the end of the stick that doesn't seek to get the most benefits out of it. The response to that has to be an open and an honest discussion, especially for those that have the political ability and the political influence to be able to have those types of conversations. And this is why encyclicals like Fratelli Tutti become particularly important, because then you start to see the kind of political prowess that the church has and how it can be utilized to be able to move certain conversations in a way that gets us to the very important aspects of it, that we can get some level of response. And so because I've run out of time, bureaucracy is an issue. We can't expect certain things to happen overnight, but where we can get some level of change moving, I think to some degree we need to take a far bigger stance than just having little conversations here and there. And perhaps to some degree, we need to start thinking about how far we can extend the kind of impact on an individual basis to get to that common good can be. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Noluthando, for your presentation. And as you spoke, all I could do was just tie your comments to what Father Zampini talked about, and for us to understand what is common good to each and every one of us, is what Father Zampini talked about, talking about, having social dialogue and creating a new culture, and how Father Beta said about having saintly African leaders. And that's the next step. I mean, if we have saintly leaders, we have people who love us, people who wish a healthy nation, and that's how we get to move to a healthy post-COVID world. Thank you so much for your presentation. I wish to invite Dr. Teresa, and I wish for you to address peace to us. And His Holiness Pope Francis dubbed peace as parts of renewed encounter. And in today's world, we are taught by Father Francis that we can no longer think of a possibility of a just war, that instead of war, we can establish a global fund for elimination of hunger. And do you think this is achievable? And what about human security? Is it still under threat from both global justice perspective and from the perspective of an African politics, religions, and economic? Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. You have summarized what I was meant to address now. And Some of it has been addressed by the speakers before me, so I will share what I have prepared. Now, this encyclical invites us to a shift in our way of thinking, our way of seeing things, and our way of doing. And in my address, I will reflect mainly on Pope Francis' ideas on peace and security. And from the onset, I allow me to register my appreciation for the depth and challenge of this encyclical. Indeed, this encyclical should lead us away from our comfort zones. Now, in my short reflection on the encyclical, I consider it important to engage in the different debates, especially around human security, war, and also a new way of being and living. Now, there's a human security debate shifts our concentration on state security and moves us instead to focus on people and community security. It recognizes several dimensions related to feeling safe, such as freedom from want, freedom from indignity, and freedom from fear. And we can ask ourselves, who experiences fear? Who mainly experiences want? Who mainly experiences indignity? And to respond to that, you find that it's mainly those who live in poverty, the displaced, the refugees, women and children, and the vulnerable. Now, this being the case, these debates should not be only left to the elites and academics, but should be inclusive of those at the grassroots levels, so that their voices and experiences can be heard and incorporated. And it also calls on a reflection on different exclusions that humanity has shrouded itself with. For instance, wants to be the norm, that of otherness, which becomes the base for exclusion of other people because of their gender, their race, their creed, their age, their affiliations, and status, among others. What creates an environment that brings about disaffected young people and minority communities, those who Pope Francis calls the abandoned by the system. We have seen an increase in migrants, people who are displaced, and also people who are being trafficked. So this encyclical is asking constructive questions regarding not only direct violence, but structural and cultural violence, which are a base of different levels of marginalization, whether socioeconomic or political. So in a way, we need to engage in these debates, and also in reference to women who are mainly marginalized further by being denied their God-given rights to equality, equity, and voice at different tables of fellowship, at the table of mediation and negotiations. So as Pope Francis reminds us, all have equal rights and a place in our common home, the earth. So this actually calls us to a new way of governance and utilization of resources for the development of community, that we all share the global resources. Therefore, capturing on the African culture of community and sharing. I would like to also reflect further on the issue of war, which actually has entrenched poverty further, especially in the global south. I argue that we can no longer invest our energies on wars and violence that deprive especially the children of their childhood, youth of their potential dreams of jobs and future hope. Pope Francis invites us to dialogue with those who have firsthand experience of war, to see its ugliness and failure, and thus will not consider ourselves naive for choosing peace. So he's kind of saying, when we choose peace, we are not being naive. and therefore encouraging us to dialogue more about peace instead of violence. In the reality of COVID-19 pandemic, we have come face to face with poverty, untold violence, especially at family, community, regional, and global levels. For instance, in the global south, it is not unusual these times to read about fathers and mothers killing themselves because they cannot fend for their families. An example in Kenya, where a woman was boiling stones because she had nothing to feed her children, to give them hope of something to eat. But in response, the media took this story and people responded. So I think that's an initiative that the Pope Francis is calling us to do, to respond to others in their needs. Globally, one initiative by Pax Christi Nuclear Disarmament Working Group put together a powerful video highlighting the difference between basic life-saving pandemic responses versus the enormous cost of nuclear weapons. And I would like to use these examples because they bring the reality of what Pope was talking about, sharing with those who are marginalized, sharing with those who do not have. In this particular video, which is available online, they have pointed out the devastation of nuclear weapons to the human population and the environment. For instance, a nuclear war between two states with only small arsenals, such as India and Pakistan, they say could disrupt the world's climate and put billions of lives at risk from famine. They further highlight the following. One, that 1 minute of nuclear costs could cater for 139,000 virus tests. 1 day's nuclear cost could cater for 200 million vaccines. And 1 year of nuclear cost could cater for hospital care for 15 million COVID-19 patients. So this really shows us the reality of why the Pope is saying, get a fund and move this money towards helping the poor. Therefore, the above examples and statistics remind us the power that is in our hands to both save and destroy lives. As Pope Francis reminds us in his encyclical, war or violence, whether through nuclear weapons or small arms and light weapons, can never be justified. In fact, the new wars, which are mainly experienced in the global south, are complex, and they not only lead to civilian casualties, children as combatants, destruction of resources, a large number of alienated, traumatized, and displaced population. And equally, war and violence cannot provide solutions to today's current realities of poverty, different forms of exclusion, divisions, and different forms of violence, locally or globally. Therefore, looking at the encyclical, Pope Francis is inviting us to a new way. I believe that this new way is the new world that we would like to live in, or the new generations would like to live or bequeath the new generations. As we have been reminded in this encyclical, there is need to embrace the core values that link us together as human beings, that is mercy, compassion, building a culture of authentic encounter, forgiveness, justice, peace, solidarity, and care for one another and our common home, the earth. Following the example of the Good Samaritan, we are called to embrace the marginalized, dispossessed, dehumanized, and those systematically under attack in our world today. Therefore, we need to open our eyes, reflect, and respond appropriately to a broken and needy world, to give hope and challenge structures and cultures that deny others of fullness of life. For indeed, Jesus came that all may have life and have it more abundantly. That's John 10:10. Pope Francis extends this invitation to us in this encyclical by calling us to consider beginning a global fund to address poverty in all its forms and also stimulate development, especially in the impoverished countries. Therefore, we need to educate ourselves and others in this new way of being and doing, that we are being challenged to go beyond the norm. So let us embrace Pope Francis' invitation to be a church that leaves our comfort zones in order to accompany life, to sustain hope, to be the sign of unity, to build bridges, to break down walls, to sow seeds of reconciliation. That is from Pope Francis. Therefore, I'm thankful for this encyclical, and we will continue engaging in this way, this new way, as we search together for a world that will articulate and live these values to create a more just, compassionate, nonviolent, and peaceful world for humanity and all God's creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Teresa. Your presentation was very key because you've mentioned about poverty and how poverty can indignify human beings. And sometimes that poverty can also lead to, war, because sometimes people are keen to fend for themselves. And as Fratelli Tutti is encouraging us that we begin to be compassionate to each other, to build our world together. And our final panelist today is Father Henry. Father Henry, Pope Francis also speaks about the possibility of peace among religions, which he sees as necessary means to guarantee religious freedom. Do you find that dialogue for common cooperation and for mutual knowledge attainable in the just post-COVID world we are preparing for? Welcome. I think, Father Henry, can you hear me? I think maybe he dropped. So I wish to take this opportunity to address some of the questions that I see on our Q&A chat box. And I will begin with LEC. Father Zampini, this is your question. Father Zampini, thanks a lot for your presentation. It is rich and sheds light to the current challenges. Could you elaborate a little more on how practically we can overcome sectarian identities generated by politics of resentment, social injustices, and failed respect of people's dignity, and embrace the universal fraternity? How can Christianity play a positive role in this regard while herself has not been innocent in playing sectarian politics or associated with its proponents?
Thank you for the question. I think that the concrete lines of action, it's about the participation democratic channels. Politics is one of the highest expression of love. So politics is not limited to party politics. Politics can be done in the way I help organize my neighborhood, my city, my parish, my radio, my social media, my business, the way we participate. And this is linked with one phrase that is Laudato Si, and the Pope paraphrases in Fratelli Tutti. There is no source of wisdom. the society is impoverished. So how concretely? Well, that will depend on different on the region you are in in the world, because we cannot talk also about Africa as if it was one country, no? Or one. So it will depend. But one role is to, and I'm saying that. Of doing that, no? The other way is the participation in economics, because if we are not artisans of our own destiny, if we cannot develop our own selves, if we cannot work, no? If we cannot find works that contribute to our society, well, then it's a bit difficult. We can propose many lines of action, but then I will become totally dependent from others. And that is not conducive for the world that we need. So political inclusion, economic inclusion goes hand in hand with political participation. We know that politics cannot be dominated by economics, or should not. But actually, the problem that it is dominated by economics is because it is dominated by the powerful. So, but if economically we had a more inclusive society, then that will help also to reduce the dominance of politics, of economics in politics. Or if there is...
You can talk now.
I'm so sorry.
Yes. Or if there is any dominance, there would be a more inclusive one.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, are you done for that, Zampini? Sorry for that interruption.
I don't know. I thought you were telling me something. No, I think that it's very difficult to say concrete things in abstract, because I will mention this tension of localization and globalization, or globalization with local favor. So if different, even if you are in Sierra Leone, it would be slightly different than in Kenya, or it would be different that you are in South Africa. No. So, but what is similar is the concept, and how to implement it. It could be different. Even in Latin America, it would be different in Venezuela than in Argentina. In a way that goes beyond the mere formal participation. So, for example, in work, if we have half of the population working in the informal sector, well, then unions are very important. But what happens with this half of the population that works? This is music for the powerful's ears. You see, so how to this is one concrete example about work. What happens with all those people who have lost their jobs, who are not unionized, who have not recognition by the state, not recognition by the market? So what do we do? So this is up to society to implement concrete economic and political instruments so as to it depends on the region, but we need creativity to promote inclusion. But the other thing, and I would say concretely, is the thing about peace. I mean, yes, it's true that it's difficult to say, yeah, we have to be peaceful if I have nothing. But this is not what the Pope is saying. The Pope is saying is that in order to be more inclusive, in order to be more participating, in order to have a more sustainable society, in order to promote Tutti, a culture of encounter. Encounter means it's painful, because if I encounter what I don't like, well, this is exactly what we need. We have to encounter the other, myself, the section of the dimensions of myself that I don't like. We have to encounter the wounds of the other. We have to encounter the earth who is crying out as well. And at that encounter, we need to include it in this dialogue and participation. And that we need to encounter the poverty that we have generated and the ecological damage. If we don't include it and it's not pain, Rose encounters. It means to encounter, to face the crisis we are having at the present. And therefore, it's like the Good Samaritan, is to be moved from here in order to act and to cure and to think in the long term how to cure our own wounds. This is something, I'm sorry that I'm not being concrete, but to be concrete, we need to discuss basic things that Pope Francis is telling us in Fratelli Tutti.
Thank you, Father Zampini, for your response. LEC, I hope the response has been able to quench your thirst and has been able to shed some more light. Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive us for the interruption with the networks. And I would like to invite Father Henry. I see he's been able to join us. Father Henry, how are you? Please unmute your microphone, Father Henry, so that you can be able to respond to us.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, you're able to hear you. Welcome.
So, first of all, I have my thumbs up for all those who have presented. Quite beautiful. How I wish that everybody in the world will hear what they have said, because this is extending the voice of the Holy Father. And I think they have done beautifully. Thank you very much.
Okay.
As you know, I am asked to speak about Chapter 8 and the last chapter of Fratelli Tutti. So, and you ask whether interreligious dialogue, humanism is possible. If we are prepared, and that is the reason for which the Holy Father has written this letter. If everybody is moved to realize that we are neighbors, then it will work. But once we close our eyes, and it will become very difficult. I have 5 areas that I'd like to briefly comment on. First, the Holy Father has made it clear that the desire of humanity for solidarity is rooted in God. That is the spring point of it. If I'm a child of God, you're a child of God, and a Muslim is a child of God, somebody who doesn't even go to church is a child of God, that means that we form one family. And this has been undertoned and stressed and underlined severally by the Universal Church. So it is a good starting point that we realize that we come from one person and we are children of the one Father. Doesn't matter whether we are yellow or green, children of the one Father. Whether non-Christians, the Holy Father urges that we should be open to the common fatherhood of all humanity and allow ourselves to be guided by transcendent truth. There are too many voices being heard and uttered today that contradict the transcendent truth. For us to be able to engage reasonably with one another, it is important that we go back and be guided by this transcendent truth. Secondly, fraternity and friendship are themselves noble religious values, whether it's in Christianity or any other religion. when you think about how people want to cluster themselves according to their faith beliefs, that is also to say that there is some element of it that we should nurture. And it's from this standpoint that it's also very necessary that we engage ourselves as pilgrims on the way. Because whether I go to one church or the other, whether I go to the supermarket or on the road, it doesn't matter whether I'm walking along with a Muslim or an unbeliever. The thing is that we are walking along. And if humanity understands that we are on the pilgrimage back to God, then it will be necessary to open up one to the other. So there's room to be made for religious born, the reflections born of religious traditions that are positive, which I think fraternity is one of them. Third, and based on what is already said, believers of different religions must see things the way God sees them. If I see the way God sees, you see the way God sees, everybody sees the way God sees, then it will be the same seeing. And how does God see? He sees with the heart. So our hearts need to be open to one another. And once the hearts are open to one another, then what springs up is love, charity, compassion, mercy. That is where all those things spring from. Then there will be no more individualism. There will be no more hatred, one for the other. So I think it is important that we should open ourselves to see the way God sees and open our hearts, therefore, one to the other in order to be able to live in peace and in union one with the other. First, all this will now call for dialogue. Dialogue. But when we look at the challenges that the world has faced with regard to dialogue, and there is an accusation that most of the conflict, especially in Africa, are masterminded by those who are convinced about their religious faith and beliefs. When we see that, then it becomes very difficult, and one begins to ask, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. When the different faith groups realize that our common source is God. And I think that it is necessary to hammer back to everybody that we come from a common source and we have common fatherhood. Fruitful dialogue will therefore necessitate returning to the established plan of God in the beginning, namely that all human beings are destined to form one human family. This partly explains why the bishops of Africa have chosen church family of God as an ideal for Africa, because in every traditional family, there is care for others. When even there is a quarrel, efforts are made to reconcile, and they are resolved. Fifth and last, the Holy Father proposes that the church should exercise her divine mandate of proclaiming the gospel. We should not be restricted to private sphere. You know, go out, don't stay there. Of course, the church has made efforts to go out time and again, sometimes with all kinds of challenges. When Father A E Orobator said, we can ask politicians questions. I said here to somebody, if you ask my president, he will tell you that he will give you a list of the people he has helped. They will not lack people to say, but is that the common good? Some of us have spoken about this. So we must constantly be guided by common good, and the church should go out. The immediate implication here is that the church should take on a proactive attitude towards interreligious dialogue. In the past, people have talked about dialogue of life. In other words, we go to the same place, we dance together. So this should be intensified. But I think that what the church and every other person needs to do is not to shy away from those areas that are difficult to discuss. because hiding the truth will not help anybody. When we now expose our own convictions and others are persuaded to see how useful these convictions are, it will help us more to foster solidarity. So ecumenism is an important aspect that to guide in this area of ecumenism, the Holy Father says, go back to the sources. And where is our source? The primary source is God. And if we go back to God, then we will realize that our neighbor is a brother. The other one who has that faith is where there is authentic worship, then there should also go back to the source of worshiping God. If we truly are worshiping God with our minds raised to Him, then we will get the revelation that we are not the only ones who exist. There are others also who exist. And then there will be no terrorist attack, no oppression, no misinterpretation of religious texts. There will be respect, rather, for the sacredness of life, and there will be respect for the dignity of all human beings. In this connection, the Pope urges church leaders not to sit aside, but to cooperate in building peace and to be intermediaries and authentic mediators. When we take on this more aggressively, and each one becomes an artisan of peace, of unity, not of division. Holy Father has also reminded the church of her prophetic role. It's important to be proactive also in this. And here is another challenge in today's society that does not want to hear anything about God. Talk to a politician and tells you, go to the church. I am not in the church, which is sometimes difficult. Nevertheless, efforts have to be made. And these efforts will be greatly enhanced by more effective advocacy. We plead with the Jesuits Commission on Justice and Peace throughout Africa to intensify the collaboration with SECAM in order to make this materialize. This will enable the church's prophetic voice and teaching not only to resonate with, but also become an integral part of debates in parliament and form the basis upon which political, policy, business, economic decisions are taken by the leaders. In the past, the church has made lots of noise about changing policies, about they don't work. But we can't give up. We can still find ways. When we go back to what Orobator says, that we need saintly politicians. Once we have them there, it will be possible for this to take place. In conclusion, the Holy Father Pope Francis is inviting us as individuals and as groups, both within and outside the church, to take our common origin and vocation seriously, namely to daily become and act like God. Everywhere we find ourselves. This involves adopting a culture of dialogue as the path, mutual cooperation as the code of conduct, and reciprocal understanding as the method and the standard. These are his words in 285. Thank you, and may God bless our efforts to understand and live out the exhortations of Fratelli Tutti.
Thank you, Father Henry, for your words today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's so sad that we don't have more time. I realize we should have scheduled for more time for this discussion. Quite literally, Fratelli Tutti is a heavy document that needs more time to be unpacked. I believe that at the end of this session that we have been able to at least identify tangible ways that we can pursue if you want to build a more just and peaceful fraternal world. And as we leave today, I ask you to kindly follow us on our Twitter account, Jenna Africa, so that you can be able to engage every day and so that you can be able to see more events and webinars that we plan every day so that you can be with us and join us. I hope next time we have more time for this. We promise that we're going to schedule more time. And please, you can find our recording on our YouTube video. You can be able to share it with your friends, people who will need just to maybe follow what we did or we discussed today. So with these few remarks, I wish to invite Father Charles to please give us closing remarks. Father Charles, welcome.
Thank you very much, Serah. I don't have much really to say. Just a word of gratitude. First of all, asking Father Zampini to deliver a word of gratitude on our behalf to the Holy Father, not only for his wise words from Fratelli Tutti, but also for his leadership to mobilize the entire church to imagine a future that is possible, to prepare a future where everybody is included, where nobody is excluded, or where nobody is killed prematurely. So thank you very much. We are very grateful to the Holy Father for his leadership. And we are also aware that the Holy Father has mobilized us to do something. So we on the ground in the church in the South, collaborating together as religious men and women, lay people, as well as the bishops' conferences, we are working together to ensure that the church indeed exposes itself as a good Samaritan, as light of the world, and provides the leadership to ensure that all these things that we are talking about materialize. And finally, I would like to thank Father Zampini for availing himself to give that very powerful and insightful keynote address. I'm sure it has left all of us inspired, feeling different and looking at the world very, very differently. Thank you very much, Father Zampini. Special words of thanks also to the UN resident coordinator for Kenya, Mr. Chatterjee, was left because he has other things to attend to. Thank you very much for coming on board once again to inspire us. Just maybe for your information, Mr. Chatterjee did not just come to give a speech. We are developing a working relationship so that we in the church and also others in his sphere, the intergovernmental organizations, we collaborate to ensure that we deliver justice, we deliver on the SDGs. And many thanks also to the panelists. As you have seen, there has been a lot of appreciation in the chat box from your wise and inspiring interventions. Thank you very much to all for attending. As Serah says, you will be given an opportunity to listen to more things to come. God bless you all. Thank you. But Serah, you have an announcement for Father Zampini and the media.
Yes, we have an opportunity for media to interact with Father Zampini. So please remain behind as the rest leave so that you can be able to have Q&A with him. Although he has left shortly, but he'll be back. So I plead with you to give him some few minutes. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your attendance.
Thank you, Sarah.
Welcome. Humphrey, thank you for joining us and from China. Augustine Jenge, thank you for your recommendations to our panel. We are very grateful. Noel Marie, I see your comment. Thank you very much for all of us. And I hope it is just the beginning for deepening this encyclical. May God bless the Pope and you all. Amen. Thank you very much. Kanali, thank you for your message. I see you. Thanks to everyone who participated and presented. Thank you very much for your feedback. Graciano, I see your message. Thank you so much for your compliment. Thank you, Elise, for your message. Much appreciation from my end. The media within, please talk to me via privately message on the chat box. Graciano, I see your message. They were a wonderful presentation. I think next week it will be very hot. My first question will be to the presenter, Father Graciano. Thank you so much for your engagement. Agnes, thank you so much for your message. Regina, thank you so much for your message. Your compliment is beautiful. Father Diudo, am I saying your name correctly? Please pardon me if I'm not. Thank you for your compliment.
Sir, I told you to settle for the coffee. Don't go for any other one. You don't actually.
Oh, it's so long. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry.
Thank you for your compliment. John, you're asking me if we're going to share various reflections from the speaker with the attendees. If you look at our Twitter, we've been sharing wise nuggets from our speakers. Maybe please see at Africa, at Jenna Africa, Jenna_Africa. Please just try to look at the conversations that have been posted there and see maybe if you'll get exactly what you're looking for. Johnston Mother, thank you so much. You say that this has been a wonderful session, and and you applaud my moderation skills. Thank you so much. Samuel, you say thanks to you, moderator, for good facilitation, and thanks to my dear brother, Father Charles, for keeping me connected with these important conversations for social change. All the way from Ghana, Caritas. Thank you for your compliment, Samuel. And on our chat box, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Our link is there. Please do so. So I wish to read the press statement by Father Augusto Zampini. And it's titled, Africa Needs More COVID Help, says the Vatican. The World Bank and IMF are this week virtually holding their annual meeting, and the Vatican today urges the IMF to double its lending capacity to 2.5 trillion US dollars, and further allow European countries to lend their unused special drawing rights to African countries, and press the US to overcome its opposition to the issuance of new SDRs. The Vatican's urgent request is propelled by the certainty that even though not so hard health-wise by COVID-19, economically, Africa is the worst hit continent by the COVID-19 shock. The Vatican also urges the IMF to assist Africa in its negotiations with China, which insists on negotiating with Africa on a country-by-country basis rather than a continental approach, which is inhibiting progress towards relieving African economic distress exacerbated by COVID-19. Lenders, both private and public, should pay attention to African finance ministers' request for an extended debt standstill of 2 years and a further request of $300 billion in new highly concessional financing, expanded access to credit and debt cancellation as well. Admittedly, this is a great deal to ask for, but we highlight the urgency of the situation and rich nations. The IMF and World Bank should not delay what is urgent, Father Augusto Zampini says, who is the Adjunct Secretary of the Vatican Department of Integral Development and leader of the Vatican COVID-19 Commission. This was quoted when Father Zampini was addressing the press after a webinar on Fratelli Tutti organized by the Africa Taskforce of the Vatican COVID-19 Commission. The current state of affairs means African governments have no means to import necessary goods as they face foreign exchange shortages, and more importantly, they have no funds for financing essential services like health, education, and social protection. As the Holy Father asks, those who can change things in the world, like rich nations, should do so and help as good Samaritans. If the rich nations, the IMF and World Bank do not help Africa and other poorer nations, what will happen?
Thank you very much to everybody. Serah may have dropped because of maybe connectivity. The press statement that she has been reading will be sent to all of you this evening by her or by somebody. So thank you very much for being on board. There will certainly be other moments when you will have a chance to interact with Father Zampini or any one of us or any representative from the Vatican itself. So we just want to thank you for coming through, and should have any queries, you can always send an email. Like I said, the press statement shall be shared with all of you, and there are contacts there for you for emailing or for further follow-up. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Have a very good evening for some. For some, have a very good afternoon.
Thank you, Father Charles. Thanks for the opportunity. God bless you for the good work you are doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, brothers. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Father Charles.
Thank you.
Please, do you have all our emails?
Yes, I was given.
Okay, very well. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Serah, are you back?
I'm so sorry, it disconnected.
Oh, okay, it's okay. So I just
Yes.
wanted that we will send them the press statement.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for everything. That was beautiful. That was
Oh,
well done.
I imagine we were not able to really unpack everything and people's questions were not addressed. Maybe next time we'll have more time.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I should inform Father Zampini's assistant that you are ending the session. Or what do you think, Father?
Yes, we've ended the press.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that we're sending them.
Okay. Okay then. It was lovely having you today.
Okay, bye, Serah.
Okay. Oh, here we are. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so Father Zampini's assistant has written. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I can leave, Father Charles?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Father Kofi.
Yeah, Serah, meet again.
Bye.